Nizar is a former advisor to President Mahmoud Abbas. He now teaches international affairs at George Washington University. Nizar, thank you so much indeed for joining us. If you don't mind, I'd like to address exactly what's been happening there at the Al-Aqsa compound, first of all. Do you think that if the Israeli forces have stormed that compound just a few hours after the truce was confirmed, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to send the Palestinians a message? Because Hamas has said that the ceasefire includes an agreement that Israeli security forces will keep their hands off Al-Aqsa, and Israel has not confirmed that particular detail.
I believe so, but in general, the whole war is a war of equilibrium. Both sides are trying to indicate to the other that they are willing to fight and they can injure the other quite substantially. And just so that we remember, all of this started precisely because Israeli policies, whether it was the evictions of Palestinian families from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem, or actually the audacity of going inside the Aqsa mosque, not only the plateau, was an aggression that was very provocative to Palestinians. So Palestinians needed to up the ante and make sure that the Israelis understand that that's not okay. And if they do that, they're gonna receive attacks as well. So it is an equilibrium.
Yeah, I mean, you're mentioning some of the underlying reasons there for the 11 days of the exchange of fire. Let's come to that in a moment, but just address immediately, if you don't mind, what you think the most important political fallout here is after these 11 days.
I think two main ones. The Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu is in trouble. He has his brand has been that he is the one that protects Israel, and he's failed to do so. The fact that you have 12 Israeli casualties and just the level of breach of the Iron Dome has been very embarrassing for the Israelis. And the fact that a militant group like Hamas was able to extract that ceasefire from Bibi makes him look very bad. The other, of course, is the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. They were proven irrelevant in this case. And from the Palestinian perspective, especially after the postponement of the elections or the cancellation of the elections, the popularity of the PA in Ramallah is definitely going to be impacted seriously.
Therefore, regarding those underlying causes, if this is to be a new departure point, maybe you don't even think it is that, but if it is to be some sort of departure point for another round of discussions, whether or not, again, a peace process exists is almost irrelevant to where we are now. What role could the Palestinian Authority play, considering the Americans refused to talk to Hamas? If Hamas is on the rise in terms of popularity amongst Palestinians and the PA is diminishing in popularity, where does that leave the issue of the underlying causes and how those need to be addressed?
Indeed, it's highly unlikely that you can get actually a serious peace process out of this. As you mentioned, the Americans are not engaging Hamas in negotiations, neither are the Israelis, so the talks would be with the PA, but the PA itself doesn't have too many cards it can play, and Hamas has shown that it is the more relevant player. So what's likely to happen is that there will be some sort of peace process that will end up with some sort of economic benefits to the Palestinians, but that's it, not an actual resolution to the process. Having said that, I wouldn't be surprised if if this ceasefire is just a lull. That is, that Israel is replenishing its missiles and is trying to understand what went wrong, so that a second round they are more successful, and likewise Hamas. That's still a possibility.
Nizar, do you think that the Palestinians are lacking significant support from the most important international actors? We've had Joe Biden day after day refusing to demand a ceasefire, eventually doing so in not particularly fully committed fashion. We've had the Germans, Angela Merkel, saying that the attacks coming from Gaza are terrorist attacks and that Israel has a right to defend itself. We've had the UK committing about 3 million, I'm not sure if it's pounds or dollars, towards humanitarian assistance for Gaza. And you think 3 million hold on, you're one of the richest countries in the world. And have you not seen the suffering that's taking place? Does all of that indicate that Palestine doesn't have those main state actors that it needs to have on its side?
Definitely, but Palestine wasn't depending on those either, right? The U.S. and the European countries have consistently failed the Palestinians, especially on the issue of the peace process and taking a stand on against Israeli violations of the treaty itself, right? The settlements. The EU could have, and European countries could have applied serious pressure on Israel back in the 90s, and they chose not to. So the failure of the peace process is definitely part of it, is the lack of serious support from international actors. Having said that, the level of popular support across the globe, in fact, for the Palestinians has skyrocketed for sure. And that is something that the European and governments and the US administration is having to respond to. And part of why Biden had to make those calls every hour was precisely because there was pressure here in the US. You had thousands of people in Detroit marching for the Palestinian cause. So definitely on that score, there has been much more support for the Palestinian cause and much more criticism and audacity and courage in criticizing this Israeli government. And again, I want to differentiate between the Israeli government and the Israeli people, because this government, and specifically this prime minister, has shown to be extremely irresponsible and completely focused on his own political survival, because he's under the investigation. And this war and all of this escalation was his attempt at escaping from his going to jail.
Nizar Farsakh, thank you so much indeed. Really interesting analysis. We appreciate your time.